everyone. All right, so really great to see, everybody. Great to see a lot of people come back. We've been doing this series for quite a few months at Yelp now. I'm SC. I'm the founder of Products That Count. The reason I do these events, and we do them once a month, is because we bring incredible, awesome, smart speakers like, Kristen tonight, and they create unique content. So what you're going to hear tonight has, never been shared before. It's really exclusive. It's really related to tech and data. And that's, kind of my way to learn a lot from these folks and also meet a lot of smart people. A lot of you are entrepreneurs, product people, analytics, marketing. There's usually a very, even mix of skills here, which is one thing I love as well. Tonight's talk is incredible because we have whiskey, we have, a lot of different, perks, and that's only the beginning. That's only the beginning. Before we get started, with Kristen's talk, I want to introduce our awesome sponsor, Yelp, who's giving us the delicious pizza, the beer, this incredible space. Travis, you want to say a few words?
Thanks. No, we're always really happy to have this series here. Products That Count is definitely my favorite series to come to. It's always fun after a long day of crunching numbers and pushing code to come down and listen to a really cool talk, and Products That Count always fills that need. So welcome, and I hope you're enjoying the pizza. We didn't have forewarning of the whiskey, so we weren't able to get a pizza that paired perfectly well with the whiskey, but I hope you found it at least palatable. So yeah, we're always happy to have folks here, and of course, one of our goals here is to meet new and interesting folks who work in the data science and product management spaces. And of course, if any of you are looking for jobs, feel free to talk to us. We're always hiring great product thinkers and data scientists here on our teams. And you can grab anybody who's wearing Yelp gear like myself or other folks in red jackets and ask us what it's like to work here with our data set and with our teams. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you folks and sit down and listen to an awesome talk.
So just so you know, the whiskey is not the only thing that we're finding out as we go with this event, and that's the awesome part. I think there are a few more surprises that Kristen has. So the way I met her was through her co-founder, Dan Ariely, who's very famous researcher on behavioral economics. And the reason I was really interested in his research is that I had a company that was a dating company in the past, and he has done a ton of research on dating and what gets people to meet and to connect better. And there are a few kind of funny learnings from that, but that's for a few more whiskeys. So Kristen was working with Dan and organizing this workshop, which is a multi-day workshop called Startuponomics. And Dan invited me there. I attended. It was phenomenal. And Kristen was front and center, using the learnings for her own product. And then fast forward a few months later, and she basically creates a company with Dan. And that's, I think, what they've been doing ever since. So she's a, brilliant product person, awesome, behavioral economics expert. And she also has worked on some, really, cutting edge tech products. With that, it's your turn.
Fabulous. I'm on. Okay, so, my name's Kristen. Thank you, Sophie. So we're gonna play actually a game, in the beginning. And there was one gentleman right when I went up to the desk, over there who basically hadn't paid. So he handed Sophie $25. There may have been a couple of you, but there was one in particular. Do you want to call yourself out? Nobody? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so this is your $25. And we're gonna do something that's kind of interesting. So you have the question usually as a product team, how do you get people to do things? Right? And so we're gonna pull on one of the more powerful ways to get people to do things, and it's called a lottery. But the little known fact of lotteries is that there's an even more powerful way to get people to do things that uses lotteries, and it's called a regret lottery. Does anyone know what this is? No one? Oh.
Your presentation.
Yep. Okay, so what a regret lottery is basically saying you have a chance to win. And so the reason that lotteries are so powerful is because we categorically overestimate our chances to win. Right? And so the thing about a regret lottery is that we help you visualize your chance to win. So here's how the game works. basically you're going to email Sophie at this email address topics that you want to hear about in the future. Got it? Now at the end of the talk, she'll pick from the registration list somebody, anyone, and that person, if they've emailed, will win the $25. If they have not emailed, they will not win the $25. Their name will be announced and everyone will know that they didn't win. This is called a regret lottery. Welcome to behavioral economics. Okay, so you have until the end of the talk. Sophie will tell us at the end of the talk. At the end of the talk, we'll also learn about the whiskeys and we'll do another little game. So, cool? Oh, that's not. Okay, great. So, just by way of introduction, my name's Kristen, and I started a couple years ago working with Dan Ariely, and in the past couple years, we basically have this thing called Irrational Labs, and what it does is basically take insights from the academic world and help companies fundamentally change their users' behavior. And typically we focus on big behavior: finance, health, education, environment. And over this past couple years, we've worked with companies at Google. We've started a behavioral economics unit there called Irrational Labs. We've worked with companies like Netflix, Fidelity, Intuit, Lyft, to run experiments and basically bring really pull the insights of academia out of academia and into the product world. So as you can see, I'm pretty passionate about this. I have a background in product management at Intuit with QuickBooks Online, and then Lytro, the funky lipstick style camera that's still selling. So and from that basically came this hypothesis, which is why I got so excited to work with Dan, that basically the product community doing very well, but we really could be doing better. So basically we are very focused on thinking about how the customer behaves, what they think, but in reality we're really missing a few things. So today I want to kind of brainstorm and walk you through kind of a thought process of how we would get to principles of product design. But before we do that, we could do that in a few ways. Typically people would think about how would we get to the principles of product design, and then you'd sit in a room and you'd put post-its up and you'd try to figure out the principles of product design. And what I'd like to start here is a thought exercise of looking at the principles of life. So I'm going to share a few things personally about my life, and then how they apply to behavioral economics, and then how they apply to product principles, and then we'll go through this method that Dan and I use to solve problems. Cool? I mean, if it's not cool, you're still sitting here and it'd be awkward to get up. So the first one, kind of like any good, I think I'm actually, should I stand over here so I'm not projected in there? So kind of like any good story, starts in the womb. I have a twin sister. Now we're fraternal, and so the thing about fraternal twins, is that you're very much just sisters. So 99.95% of your DNA is the same, but the different thing about twins than sisters is that we basically shared everything. So we shared a bunk bed, we had our lunches, sports, friends, sleepovers, you name it, we shared it. So this is very interesting. Actually, I hadn't shared this talk with my, can't believe I'm telling you this. I hadn't shared this talk with my sister yesterday, and I shared this with her, and she's like, Kristen, you're completely wrong. We did share something. We shared a boyfriend. It's awkward. But beside that, we didn't share anything. So in general, then you think about all the things that we actually had and in common, and what happened. This is my twin sister, and she's now a yogi. She does meditation. She dances. And in a world, in her perfect world, she'd be relaxing 24 hours a day. So in my perfect world, I'm basically this professional multitasker, workaholic. I leave workouts when they're stretching afterwards, right? So you think about that, and you think about how the small differences in our DNA and our environment can really leapfrog into these kind of huge differences in how we turned out as human beings. So very, very small differences make a big difference, and I think that's a big difference in life. Okay, lesson number 1, hold on to that. Okay, so lesson number 2, how many of you have moved across country for a job? Yeah, I mean, we're in San Francisco. This is what we do. So I was at University of Wisconsin, had this nice offer for consulting in Chicago, also had an offer from Intuit. How would one make this decision? So this is a huge life decision, right? You can kind of imagine, what's that, sliding doors, that your lives would turn out very differently if you made one decision or the other. And so how would a college kid make this decision? like every college kid, right? Intuit offered me $9,000 more, and what do? $9,000 more is a lot of money, you take the money. Now this is called the money illusion. So basically what I did is said, X versus X plus 9. What looks better? X plus 9. Very nice. Now we live in San Francisco. We know that X plus 9 is a terrible way to do math, right? Like Intuit would have had to pay me 2X more in order for the cost of living to be equitable. I recently, when I was doing this, did the math, and it's about 100% more for bread and 78% more for rent. So to live in San Francisco. So the math of actually X versus X plus 9 is completely wrong. So what should I have done? Ask for more. I didn't even think of that. I'm a female. Terrible joke. Just kidding. Okay, so the real factors of happiness, if you think about like what would make you happy and how you should be doing these comparisons, right? You should be thinking of the quality of life. Usually this involves understanding things like a commute, right? In San Francisco, I'm commuting an hour a day. This is 2 hours of my life. You add that up, that's a lot of time. In Chicago, not so much, right? We should have also looked at basically the types of people. So I'm a Midwesterner, so I like to play dodgeball. In Chicago, there would be people playing dodgeball. Here, there are people looking at their phones. Now, I opted into the tech life, but these are kind of things that you should evaluate as you're looking at like big life changes, right? The other thing, I like to say, in reality, you should look at the mating possibilities, right? Like you're moving across country, you're a college kid, like what are you going to do for the next 5 to 10 years? So in Chicago, there are more women than men. In San Francisco, there are more men than women. This is very good news since I moved to San Francisco. However, upon reflection, I think that they actually included engineers in this count. And so it's actually not correct. But despite that, these are the things that I probably should have been looking at, and I was not looking at. Instead, I was blinded by this concept of X versus X plus 9. And now the thing is that I kind of want to like put this out there that, San Francisco worked out amazing for me, but in reality, I don't really know the counterfactual, right? I don't really know the counterfactual of how Chicago would have worked out, because, and this is kind of the punchline, is that I really was paying attention to my gut intuition. And when I looked at the X versus the X plus 9, my gut intuition was terribly wrong. And so in general, like paying attention to your gut intuition is something we do on a normal everyday basis. Extremely scary, right? When we do it for these huge life decisions that determine the trajectory of our future. Cool. Lesson number 2. Okay, how many of you know, or this is lesson number 3, so how many of you know Stitch Fix? Really? Not that many people. Okay, so Stitch Fix is, it's because you're men. Stitch Fix is the trunk club for women, right? So basically they ship you clothes, you try them on, if you like them, you keep them, if you don't like them, you ship them back, they provide the shipping, right? So now we know it, and if you don't, now you should tell your female friends, because it's fabulous. So the thing here is that, why did I try Stitch Fix? I tried it because my roommate looks amazing, right? She dresses exceptionally nice. And I always I really, really want to get better at dressing. Very simple things, right? And I was like, it's not, upon reflection, that I don't want to dress better. It's not that I don't actually care about these things, but it's actually that I just don't have time. I don't feel like I have time, right? It's the friction of actually doing this that prevents me from doing it. It's not actually a need or a want or a desire to dress better. So Caroline, my roommate, is somebody who has her toenail polish matching her dress. And for me, it was all about getting compliments on black, where I was very excited about that. But in general, when Stitch Fix came along, basically they send me the clothes, I have them in my possession, and in no way, shape, or form do I actually believe that they could pick out clothes better than I could. Right? I answered a 5-question survey, and I'm sure the 5-question survey is very nice, but in reality, it's a 5-question survey. And so how would I imagine that they would do this better than me? But in fact, they sent me the clothes. I tried them on. What happens? I don't actually want to take any action, just not actually looking good. You don't want to take the action to send them back. So here's kind of the third epiphany, is that we avoid friction, right? We avoid things that actually take time, even if it kind of goes against our overall preferences in life, or what we think are our overall preferences in life. Cool? I wish I had water. Or whiskey. Just kidding, yeah. Okay, so these are the 3 lessons I would propose is basically like kind of core and seminal to the day-to-day decisions that we make and then kind of the big decisions that we're making. Oh. Huh. Interesting. Okay, so I have like 3 screens going on here. Unclear what's going on. Anyway, so basically, So basically the question is how do we take those behavioral economics principles, or sorry, the life principles, and think about them in the terms of behavioral economics and product principles. And so what I would propose, and I'll show you some research, is basically these are kind of the fabric of our decision making. So these 3 principles are how we think about not only just the decisions and the examples that I said, but in general the fabric of our decision making for how we go about life. So I'll show you some research so you believe me, because it sounds like a very bold statement to say, oh, the three things that I learned in life, and the 3 principles of product. But in reality, these things are things that we should be paying attention to as we're product people, right? Because we're making these kind of irrational decisions on a day-to-day basis. And then we want to think about how our users are making these irrational decisions on a day-to-day basis, and then the implications to our product. Okay, so the one that we started with is kind of concept of small details making a big difference. Have you guys seen this picture? Before, slab of meat. What's the difference between the slab of meat?
One on the left is thicker?
No, they're the same. Yeah, exactly. No, this is how it would be labeled. So basically 75% lean, 25% fat, and now we have huge differences in how we perceive the actual slabs of meat, right? So very small differences in labeling make huge differences in how we actually perceive the world, right? Nothing about this slab of meat changed, except from your perspective maybe, but nothing actually changed except the labels. I'll bring this to our attention as well. So we did a nice little survey. How many people are Lyft people here? Okay, and how many people are Uber people here? Okay. So I think this side of the room is Uber and this is Lyft. Maybe there's some social proof going on, I don't know. And so the question is basically at surge time or prime time, what do? They raise prices, they raise it by 25% for Lyft and 1.25x for Uber. So we all are like probably pretty good at math because you're data scientists that will soon work at Yelp. You see that what I did there? They will soon work at Yelp. And so you think this should be the same, right? People should respond to this the same, but do they? So any hypothesis on if one is better or worse than the other?
That's better.
You think this is better? Sorry, no, this is your right. Okay, sorry. So what do you think? Raise your hand if you think this is better. And better means that people would more take this better for Lyft. And do you think this is better? Okay, so what we did was run a survey that basically asked 400 people, said, how far would you walk to avoid this price increase? And we did this with 25% and 75%. We did this 1.25x, 1.75x. And we did it with the associated dollar amounts, like $5 and $15. And what happened? Significantly more people would walk to avoid this. Right? And why? Well, we can argue the whys, but perceptually 25 is bigger than 1.25x. We're used to this kind of a number, right? We're used to a discount number. We understand how to take this in. We could also say this is a bounded percentage, so we know how much this is close to 100%. But in reality, what this means is that Lyft is losing a shit ton of money, right? By having a small details of 25% versus 1.25x. So very small details in how we frame things can make huge differences in how we interpret them in a larger scale. Okay. Okay, so the second thing is now basically our gut intuition is not always right. And so as a former product person, I used to work with Colleen at Intuit, and so I understand that some of the decisions that I made at Intuit were completely wrong. Right? Because we're trusting our gut intuition. So we're basically listening to things that we think are correct, but not actually correct. And then other people are affirming them, or we talk to 2 or 3 customers and they're affirmed, because we're hearing what we want. Okay. So how would this actually apply? So basically pretend that how many people actually have bought a house here? Wow, that's a lot for San Francisco. Okay, so I was expecting like almost no one, and then we'd go into this whole mortgage conversation. Okay, so you have a small house and a big house, and you have to decide which one to buy. So in this case, this researcher, George Lowenstein, his PhD student is actually in the audience. People are moving from San Francisco to Pittsburgh or from Alabama to Pittsburgh, right? They have the same income. So they have the same exact income, and they're going to Pittsburgh and they're going to choose a house. Now, what are they going to look at to choose this house? Price. Great. So price in Pittsburgh. What else would they look at?
Appreciation, schools.
Huh?
Schools.
Schools.
Appreciation, future appreciation.
Future appreciation in general. Yep.
Price per square foot.
Price per square foot. Location. Size. Neighborhood. Obviously, you guys are missing the mating thing, but that's cool. Yeah, okay, these are very reasonable things for them to look at. So what actually do they look to buy their house? So, how they decided if they were to buy a big or a small house is that if they moved from San Francisco, which is a much more expensive city than Alabama, they bought a much more expensive house. So we were correct in that they were paying attention to prices. This is correct. But they were not paying attention to prices in Pittsburgh. They were paying attention to prices in their city that they moved from. Right? Which is kind of a terrible way to look at things. You basically say, I moved from an expensive city, and so I'm going to choose a house that fits into that price range. Now, we know this because we track them a year later, and what happens to the people who bought a big house? They downsize, and what happened to the people who bought a small house? They upsize. Because they are now able to associate in the relative fashion, because they're judging prices now relative to Pittsburgh and not relative to the city, what house they should actually live in versus what house they're paying attention to. So again, we're basically here, and this is another kind of subtlety to this lesson, is that we really are what we measure. So we really pay attention to things that we measure, and sometimes this pushes us in the wrong direction, e.g. our gut intuition. This kind of goes back to this Chicago versus Intuit thing, and basically we're paying attention to what's easily measurable and paying attention then to our gut intuition. Okay, so this third lesson is probably my favorite. It's basically, if we talk to any product teams, the first thing that we think about is reducing friction. Right? Basically, if you think about how humans behave, we have this aversion to friction that's just quite incredible. So in the 1980s, the 401k approach was called the Field of Dreams approach. Basically, if you offer it, they will save. So you'd offer a variety of asset classes, you offer a variety of contribution rates, you don't auto-enroll them, but you just give everyone all of the options. And what happened? Not too much, right? Not a lot of people saved. So we've evolved the thinking, which is very nice, and this is probably, if you think about one of the cool things that behavioral economics has done for the world, I'd probably hold like auto-enrollment for savings or auto-enrollment for 401k up on the pedestal and say this is probably one of the coolest things that the academic field has done. But the interesting thing, this is a study that basically said we're going to either not auto-enroll you and you still got 60%, that's actually very impressive, or we're going to auto-enroll you and you get close to 100. So not very terribly surprising, right? If you auto-enroll somebody, we're now kind of on board with this would help more people enroll. The interesting and surprising thing is that there's two lines here. So there's two lines here, and one is an auto-enrolled at 3% and one is auto-enrolled at 6%. So basically, it's not that people don't have a preference to save. They don't have a preference of what they save. What they do is they have a preference to not do anything. Right? So again, like kind of as a product team, we usually say, wow, like they really don't want to do this. And you're like, how can we get them to do this? And it's not necessarily that we have to get them to do this by convincing them. It's literally we just have to get them to not, that be the path of least resistance. Right? To remove the friction from the equation so that we're giving them a path of least resistance. And we can argue later about paternalism and not and how we should think about this. But in general, this is kind of a seminal lesson in behavioral economics. Oh. Okay, so this is kind of the proposal I'm making tonight, is that we can take lessons from life, which we make kind of these irrational decisions in our everyday. So we've got these like daily decisions, these big decisions. And we should think about them as basically kind of the fabric of our decision making for not only ourselves, but for our users, and that are coming from this academically proven field called behavioral economics. And then we can use this as seeds for how we think about how our users behave and principles for product design. Okay, so all very nice, all very conceptual. Usually like kind of people, I used to give this kind of an overview and then people would leave and say, how do I apply it? And nothing would really happen. So the next little piece, and this is kind of where I'd hope get your involvement and hopefully have some like tangible takeaways, is really how do we actually apply this when the rubber meets the road of sitting down with your product team? So this is the process that Dan and I have evolved into. Right, as we're kind of talking to product teams and figuring out how to apply these behavioral economics principles into actually tangible experiments and test hypothesis. As an aside, right when I started working with Dan about 2 years ago, we sat down and we started writing these things because what would happen is that product people would always come up and say, how do I do X? And we're answering the same question over and over again. So last week we put out, it took us like a year and a half to do, but we put out a summary of all the behavioral economics principles and how we could basically take, and it's nothing revolutionary, right? So all these things are like in academia right now, but they're like trapped in these either like very long books or in academic papers, which you only read the abstract. And so in general, like these books basically say, this is a very nice principle, and then here's how you would apply it to the product world for the very question that basically says, how do we as product people improve users' lives using kind of hypotheses that are research backed versus kind of our gut intuition. Oops. Okay, so I'm going to use an overused term. Dan can get away with this because he's from North Carolina and like, you should just say hacking. Yeah.
You said you just noted those down. Is there a place we can find those?
Yeah. I was like, you just like threw me a little softball there. I'll tell you afterwards because I don't want to oversell, but I will tell you. So irrationallabs.org, and then there's the books there, but I won't leave without telling you. Thank you. So we use this term as hacking as a metaphor. And basically what it says is that hackers are really good at finding the small vulnerabilities in systems. So I'm not using this as like hackathon or anything. I'm literally using this as people who hack systems, the bad guys. But that take something and they're very creative to find the very specific area where they could intervene. Yeah, hackers can find a tiny vulnerability, get them in a server and then help them move laterally. So to do this, this is the Target example. So, right, Target got hacked. Let's think about how this actually happened. So the hackers were trying to do two things. They had to actually get the credit card information and then they had to store it. And so this is what, this is the flow of events. This is what a user would go through in order to buy something from Target. Right? They swipe their card, accepted, it's stored, it's encrypted, it's get on the Target servers, and then the Target also has an access to vendors to bill the people that are buying or the people that are the providers. So what did they do? They basically found the two vulnerabilities. They said there's a very, very small second when then the credit card info is stored in this RAM and we can create a RAM scraper and take that. And now the second problem is how do we actually get that information stored on our servers? And what they realized is that there are these vendors who are logging into a system. It's now a one-off system, which is much easier to hack. They get into that system through like documentation that's just random, like posted on Target.com website, and they capture this data and then they move it to their servers. Right? So what they're doing is basically they laid out this whole system and then found the very tiny vulnerabilities where they could hack. So what I would propose is basically that kind of this system of saying we want to identify the key behavior, the very specific behavior that we want to happen. We want to then identify exactly where the decision point happens, where we can intervene, and then do this attack mode, right, where we apply the principles, we apply the tools in our tool belt to actually change behavior. All very abstract still, I know, so we're going to take it down a level. So basically, so we have a problem, it's called obesity. It's terrible, about 1/3 of Americans are obese. So I'd like to use this as a small example of how we can take a big problem and think about how to hack it using this model. I like to say it's a big problem, it's getting larger. So this is kind of how it is funny and it's not funny, right? It's actually very sad. Has evolved. So the question here now is, how would we solve a big problem like obesity? So we want to identify the very specific behavior that we want to change, and then the key decision point. So for this, if we just say we want to solve obesity, where would you start? Very unclear where we start to solve a huge problem like that. So what we want to do is say the specific behavior that we want to change is getting people to eat less at work. Now there's a problem, right? There's a very specific problem that we can solve. We can even say we want to get them to eat 100 calories less while they're at work. And now we're going to think about while they're at work, what is a very specific decision point that we can intervene at? And we do something like we go to the cafeteria and we say, at the very specific decision point, when people are actually making a decision to eat more or less, this is where we can intervene. Now, in some worlds, what would you do? You would send out an email communication that said about the menu, and you'd star something that said something was healthy so that people knew when they went into the cafeteria what would be healthy or not. Right? You'd put up signs that advertise the food. You would basically send out emails about how being healthy is very nice. And this proposal basically says that's all very nice, but doesn't work. What we should do is think about the key decision point that somebody's actually going to be picking up the food. Okay, so if you haven't read Mindless Eating, Brian Wansink, he's coming to Startuponomics, which I'll promote as well, don't you worry. He's coming to Startuponomics, and he's basically kind of the leading food thinker. So Google actually has him in as a researcher to think about how they can get people to eat differently. So he did something where he intervenes in cafeterias. So what would you do to get people to eat better? To the crowd. Yeah.
Make the good stuff more accessible.
And say more, what does this mean?
More accessible, so, that way it would make the bad stuff harder to find.
Okay, very nice. So you would hide things. Great.
Change the order. Put the bad stuff at the end and replace it.
Very nice. Yep.
Post-calorie count.
Post-calorie count. So interestingly enough, this doesn't work. Yeah. So this is in the information strategy side of things so New York basically did a very nice, natural experiment where they put on calories to all of their menus. You probably have seen this. And then you measure how well this works when you walk into a Starbucks or a McDonald's when things have calories. And plus or minus 1% is the behavior change. And the reason, I just want to pause here for a second, because this is a very nice point of does information change behavior? Not to pick on you, but the behavioral economics world would say, hell no. Right? And it's been proved in a lot of domains, but eating is a very nice one. It's not like you walk into a, McDonald's and are surprised that the Big Mac is 1,200 calories. Actually, it's probably much more, like 2,000 or something. Like, you're not expecting it to be a health food store. Right? So just telling you that information is actually not at the key decision point. The key decision point is when you have to decide to go to McDonald's in the first place. Okay, more things. Change the plate size. Yes, you could change the plate size. You could change the bowl size. My favorite idea is actually that you would send small plates home to families. So this hasn't been done yet, but we're trying to push this. It's basically, screw this whole work thing. Like, let's just get everyone eating smaller plates at home. Yep.
Have the healthy foods available for you to pick up, but if you have unhealthy foods, you ask somebody to give it to you, like behind a glass.
Very nice. So I like this because this is a concept of adding friction. So when we want people to do things, we want to take away friction, and we want them to not do something, we want to add friction to make it harder for them to do. Very nice. At the key decision point. In the back. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, we'll come to that, but yes.
Yes.
Don't serve unhealthy food. Yeah. Right. So in general, actually, behavioral economics is a very nice answer, but if we could change the world, we'd just change policy. A much easier approach to behavior change is saying we will never sell cigarettes in the U.S. Right? Versus saying we're just going to raise a tax, we're going to do these things. So in general, if you could say we're going to take away the cookies, we could get people to eat better. I think there's just a question of will people do that, and do we want to wait for policy to make that decision? But yes.
Black market anyway. It'll just create a black market for.
Yeah. Exactly. So that is kind of Google's things. They basically can't take anything away now from people because they're so used to it, and so they have to add things in to make it look better. Okay, last two, and then we'll reveal.
Show pictures of cockroaches or fat people.
Interesting. I actually haven't had that one before. That's very nice. So, yeah. So it could work in the opposite way too. So we do have goal priming research that would basically say if you're primed with your goal before you have to make a decision, that you could make a better decision. I haven't yet. I mean, I think this is probably true if you had some maybe like the bad food just roped off and the cockroaches were just like, feeding on it, that would be almost worse than not having any bad food. Yeah. Very nice. Okay, last one. Yep. Interesting. Say more?
So in Google cases, like food is free, but like, if your food is like, higher than certain level, how do you charge?
Yeah, very nice. So pretty much a tax, right? A tax on food, adding friction. We'll go through some of the things, and you guys hit actually most of them. So sequencing, where in the line does the food actually come, is a very key one. So you place the food in the front, you have less room on your plate. This is probably my favorite, where you rename things. So you basically take corn and you call it creamy corn, and all of a sudden it becomes more attractive. Right? So if you think about wine too, and maybe we'll talk about this with the whiskey tasting, we very much pay attention to how things are labeled and the descriptions on them. So we launched these workbooks 2 weeks ago, and as a small experiment, Amanda ran something that basically had a very descriptive name of cheese and then just cheese. Right? And the very descriptive name was a much cheaper cheese. What got eaten more? The very descriptive name of cheese. Almost all of it was gone. And I got exactly. But this is actually a holistic thing, and I got all the other cheese to take home, which was a very nice cheese. So it was very strategic. So you could hide things. So this is the concept of adding friction. You could basically close the door and then, make it harder for them to push open. So this is the counterintuitive one. Usually people say, don't give people trays, take the trays away because then they'll take more food. This is kind of why we test things, because trays are actually good because you take salad and you don't take dessert. Or not that you don't take dessert, but trays actually don't impact how many people take dessert. So if you have then two plates on there, you're more likely to be able to carry it. Shrink the bowls, smaller plates, hide things from our first person over there. Use fruit bowls that look prettier. So this is usually where I look at the designers and this is there. It's usually in behavioral economics we don't think about aesthetics actually winning, but sometimes if things look prettier, it may actually change behavior. Usually we like to test these hypotheses versus just having kind of the designer go nuts. And then this is another very nice one. You just ask people. You say, do you want a salad? All of a sudden people take salads. It's crazy. And then another one just to move it in front of their face, so they have to walk around it in order to take it. And then, or you could add friction by having people pay cash in 2 different lines. You'd make an express line, or basically you have kind of some social norm where people get through the line, and then you have a longer line for people to wait if they're buying bad food. So if you notice, a lot of these examples are about taking away friction or adding friction. So kind of a seminal thing here is how you think about making things accessible to people or not accessible to people, and then how they are perceived, their path of least resistance. Okay, so this is we started with this example because it basically lays out everything, right? It says we're going to identify the key behavior of eating better in a very specific location. We can think about, 100 calories. We have a key decision point, which is in the cafeteria. And then we have all of these very kind of ideas that we can all come up with about how to attack the problem. So what I'd like to do now is do one example where it's not as obvious where the key decision is. Because I think in a product world, we really have to kind of think, do we control the key decision, or does the key decision happen elsewhere? And then how do we direct our forces? Because if we really direct our forces to the wrong time where people are making the decision, we've wasted a shit ton of effort. Okay. So we did this, so my Lyft people who are here, not the Uber people, talking to you guys now. So, we did this nice experiment with Lyft, which is the, ride-sharing, taxi service where normal people are, driving other people around via a mobile app. And the question that they came to us with was, a lot of people are driving on Tuesday nights, or Tuesday mornings, and we want to get them to drive on Friday night. Now, it's a good thing for the drivers because you make more money on a Friday night. The problem is that these drivers are actually normal people and want to go out on Friday night. So very tough for them to make the decision to drive on a Friday night when they also have a social life. So what should we do? Obviously, the first thing that they wanted to do was pay them more. It's a very nice strategy, but not sustainable, and you usually have to pay them a lot. So in general, right, if you want to use monetary incentives, there's extrinsic versus intrinsic motivations you have to worry about, but that's a whole nother thing. It's like hard to afford, right? So if you can pull out another like tool in your toolkit, we should definitely do this. So we started with basically this concept of like writing down all the things that happen and then figuring out where the key decision point is to get them to drive more. So the first thing they do, they activate their account. They set preferences for the number of hours per week they work. They sign up for next week's hours on a Wednesday. They get notified of their hours on the Friday. They drive. And then they get notified for how much they make after they drive, 2 days after they drive. And then if they want to pick up more hours anytime, they can. So what would be our hypothesis for where the key decision point here is? Wednesday sign up. Thank you, Terry. Beautiful. So when they sign up on Wednesday is really the point that we want to intervene. Now where is Lyft intervening right now? They're intervening down here 2 days after they drive. So this is not at the key decision point. We're telling them how much they make, right? But we're not telling them at the point where they actually are making the trade-off. Because up here, what they're thinking about is, who am I going to hang out with on Friday, or am I going to drive? And then as a follow-up, I sat in like 20 Lyfts and just asked them to help me think about how they evaluate how much money they make per week. So as an aside, I'm kind of going to tangent a little bit. I didn't ask them how they feel about Lyft. I didn't ask them like what they think I should do. I didn't ask them, how would you get more? Why would you want to drive on Friday? I said, how do you think about how much you make and what you make on a Tuesday versus a Friday? And what they would say is basically they do this elaborate calculation, which some couldn't do. Say, I make $300 a week. So what does that mean? It means that they're not calculating it a per hour rate. It means that they're basically saying every hour is equal, and that at the end of the week I take home a paycheck. And that paycheck is not related to the time of day that I work, which is counterintuitive to what we want them to think. So what we did basically is intervened at the point of decision and showed them the opportunity cost of not driving on a Friday night. So we did this in 3 ways, which I think are pretty interesting. We just showed them the amount. So on a Tuesday night, you could make $15. On a Friday night, or Tuesday morning, you could make $15. On a Friday morning, you could make $35. And then we did something a little bit more interesting where we showed them how much more you could make on a Friday. So you could make $20 more on a Friday than you could on a Tuesday. And then we said another condition is going to be show them how much they could lose. How much could you lose on a Friday or on a Tuesday by driving on a Tuesday and not on a Friday? And they could lose minus 20. And that would total up, right? So at the very bottom, they'd see how much money they were going to lose because they're not driving on Friday nights. So in all conditions, what happened? Showing them the opportunity cost worked. And the one that worked the most was the loss aversion. Because you're literally being very, very salient at the point of decisions about what people are going to lose, what the trade-off actually is. Very different than emailing them 2 days later with how much money they made per week. Right? And this is a much cheaper solution. Okay. Cool. Next one. Oh, I had things. Okay, so this is kind of the last example. How should we reduce honking in India? And now, granted, I've never been, so that I'm very much risk the opportunity of offending people. This story. 5 minutes. No one has any ideas.
Take away horns.
Take away horns. That's very nice, yeah. Yep. So kind of in the policy aspect, we're just gonna regulate them away. Cool. Yep.
Street lines or signals.
Okay. So basically adding some rules of the road to people or for people. Yep.
Make the horns louder on the inside of the car.
Did you see this study?
No.
Okay, well, good job. What's your name?
Ian.
You win. Okay. So what did we do here? We basically said every time, so honking in India is something that's pervasive. Everyone does it, and they did a study that says what percentage of the time do you honk is actually for safety, and a very, very small percentage. So again, we're not going to intervene for something that is good for safety, but what we want to do is get people to think about doing something before they do it. So this was a study that basically took over horns in cars. So this is not a scalable solution unless car manufacturers do it. But they did exactly that, is every time you would honk, outside the horn would beep and inside the horn would beep. And you had to press the horn inside in order to turn it off. So when you want to get someone to do a habit, you want them to not think at all. When you want to get them to stop a habit, you want them to think. And so before they actually press the horn, then momentarily they're thinking what would happen after they press the horn. Right? They actually have to stop and then say, I am going to have to take an action that turns this off. And this reduced honking by 60%. Very nice. Adding friction, taking away friction, very powerful. Okay, so this looks like something that we did, I did in South Africa with a insurance company that basically did the same kind of thing where we said, here are the behaviors that we want to do, here are the barriers, here is where we're going to intervene because we think it's the big decision point. And then here's the outcome. So here was the actual behavior that we wanted to happen. And then from this list, we said, okay, now here we're going to apply, given that we know this, we're going to start applying our behavioral economics toolkit, social proof, loss aversion, relativity, kind of all the ideas that we tossed out for the cafeteria example and for the lift example and for the honking example. So this is very nice timing. I'm done. This is the last slide. I think the message that we want to really think about is when we're contemplating how do we solve problems in the product world, we want to, this is as simplest as we can boil it down to, and any simpler, it's terrible, right? So we just say we want to identify the very, very specific behavior. So this is usually what product teams do is that you sit in a room and you look at an Excel sheet that's like active use, retention, loyalty, paid users. This is not a behavior. This is an outcome. And so in the behavior world, we want to have people laser focused on a very specific behavior. This is not healthy eating. This is eating a salad, right? These are very, very specific behaviors that the product team can get behind. And then you identify the key decision point at which this happens. Usually it may not be as intuitive. If you hit before or after, you're just kind of wasting effort. Because it's a very information strategy of telling people to do something at a later or earlier date is much more difficult. And the third thing then is we identify the behavior principle you can test. And to your little softball there, this is where we wrote these workbooks that basically say, here are some typical behavior principles that you can pull out of your toolkit to use. So this is kind of, this is social proof, relativity, loss aversion, incentives, reward substitution, all these things that we have when we understand the cognitive biases and how to apply them. Oh. Okay. So I don't think I have time for questions, but I do have we do. Okay, but we do have time to do two things, one of which is going to be, do you have the lottery winner?
Yes, I'm going to pick the lottery winner.
Okay, while you pick the lottery winner, we'll reveal the results of the whiskey tasting. Okay, yeah, go for it, actually.
So I have Harpreet Songa. I'm going to go in my email.
Wait, back there. Did you email?
Sorry.
Did you email? Okay, I'll take the $25. This is another game that works to my advantage. By the way, if you do want to talk about regret lotteries, so David, where's David? Okay, I think he left, actually. Bummer. George Lowenstein is like the top researcher for regret lotteries, and they are probably one of the more powerful things that you can do to get people to change behaviors. If you want to test one out, the way to do it would be to, if you have a compliance or survey thing at your company, you basically do the same thing that I did. You say everyone has a reward available to them. Everyone who answers the survey by a certain date is eligible to win the reward. However, everyone's entered into the lottery. At a certain date, I'll pick the winner, and then I'll email the company out with the winner names. And if you didn't actually do the survey or complete the compliance thing, you don't get the reward. What this does, again, is get people to visualize the fact that they could lose the reward, and that their name could be emailed out to people saying that they actually didn't win. Cool? Okay, whiskey tasting. Amanda, do you want to come up? Okay, drum roll. How many people whiskey tasted? What? I mean, you guys not drink? Like, it's like 20 people. Okay.
So thanks all for tasting the whiskeys. For those of you who didn't get a chance to look at them, we basically had 3 different kinds of whiskeys with their descriptions. The descriptions were, the number 3, I think, was homely, our most comforting whiskey yet. It was 1 line. The middle description was totally bogus. It was like bold yet bashful, strong yet soft, like completely nonsense. And then the number 1 was an actual, like, one of the top whiskeys, like, description about how it came from the mountains and this and that. So, the results of the whiskey tasting, and we heard a lot of different comments, like, this one has more bite, this one's smoother, this one has a nice aftertaste, this and that. Number 2 was the one that was chosen the most overall. But they were actually all the same whiskey.
What? You guys got punked!
And there were a few of you who like spend enough time like going back and forth, so I think some of you were kind of onto it, but it was really delightful to watch the debates, the heavy debates that were going on as to the...
Where's our whiskey taster? In the very beginning we had a whiskey taster. Or like a professional expert whiskey taster.
Oh.
Yeah, what did you think? I think his name's Phil. What did you think?
I really like number 3.
Okay, so what is this? This is a very nice lesson on multiple levels. Number 1, our gut intuition is not always right? Number 2, we pay attention to what's easily measurable. So we basically asked you to measure these whiskeys on a scale of quality, and you said, yes, I will, and then you do it. Right? This is kind of this fascinating. And then the third thing is experts aren't always right. No offense, Phil, but I am picking on you. But this is a very nice lesson, is that we can be overconfident. We can all be overconfident, but people who can also be overconfident are experts as well. So at your next house party or something, this is a very nice game to play.
And just as a...
You're also implicitly inferring that they were different, though.
Huh?
You're also like implicitly inferring that they were different. Instead of asking, are these two whiskies the same?
This is true. Yep. We were definitely not giving you any favors, of kind of leading, we definitely were leading you into this, kind of trap. I think the question is, how much can we taste something different when it's not actually different? So how much are we, like, we're actually, you know, people, the quotes, right? It's like, oh, this is terrible. This is much better, right? Like, we're seeing something that's not actually there. Very interesting. And I think interesting when we think about what cues we actually use to judge quality. So typically we judge quality based on price, and when price is gone, we have very little measure of judging quality. So I could go on a rant, but free is actually one of the most terrible things invented because it doesn't give you a measure of quality. Right? So if something is free in the App Store, you have 2 things free, very hard to measure quality. And so what happens? Lowest common denominator, right? Apps become lower quality. So, there, again, like multiple studies on basically if you charge $10 versus $20, more people will buy the $20 wine because we use price as such an indicator of quality that will move up to any kind of indication that we have in order to measure, what's easily measurable. But yes, we definitely did not give you any favors.
And just as an additional, the last time we did this study, we actually had different,
yeah, that's true.
brands of whiskey. And we were trying to measure the effect of the descriptions. And so we put the flowery description with the least expensive whiskey, like a $10 bottle like this big. And people chose that one more, like twice as much than any of the other.
Cool. Okay.
Couple questions.
They have to be insightful. Yeah.
How do you see the general implications for the usage of these types of nudges, so to speak? Because obviously I think one of the first industries that has really taken us to heart is the gaming industry.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has been cues that one might argue aren't necessarily beneficial or healthy.
Yeah.
Though they can be used for both directions. So where do you see that going?
Yeah. So we actually we don't work with gaming companies. We only work with, so we do work with Google, which has a lot of applications, but we tend to work with helping people save money, eat better, learn. So if you just take about the saving money concept and you think about where people make the decision, where are they making the decision in saving money? When they're swiping their credit card, when they're, choosing to invest and they're allocating their assets, where do people spend most of their time and effort into helping people improve their spending and saving? Not at the point of decision. Right? So all this financial literacy stuff, which is basically we're going to teach you, even men, right? We're going to teach you how to do something like very interesting and very not effective. So there was a wrap up of all the financial literacy programs that were ever done, so over 200, and said how big of change did these financial literacy programs make? And the biggest one made a 6% difference in savings. And that was the biggest, and they had a much lower effects for lower income. So if you think about these specific applications, like at Google, we worked with in the past year and a half 25 teams, ranging from like self-driving cars to AdWords to the sales team, just because there's wide-reaching applications once you understand like how people think and behave and the cognitive biases that we approach the world with. So I think Zynga's figured it out faster than many academics, some of these principles, but I think that's not the only application. And we think about points, that's just one way to think about our cognitive biases, where we are what we measure, and we have goals and we like progress and all these things, but you can apply goals and progress to things like eating better, saving money, saving the environment, all these kind of big ticket items where you don't want to look at the global warming, you don't want to look at retirement, you actually want to think about rewarding people in the now, even though you want to get them to do something in the future. Yep.
So a lot of the examples you've given have been sort of B2C, so right, the like consumer, or at least people acting as a consumer in that situation, like with drivers or
yeah.
Consumers. So have you seen any examples that are more B2B related, and how they are the same or different, given that decisions are usually made on a longer time frame?
Yeah.
More structured process.
I don't have any. And I think the reason is because it's really hard from an academic perspective to study B2B. So it's very easy to study consumers when you can basically say we have a condition and a control group, maybe 5 conditions. Imagine studying a B2B relationship or a B2B, anything. You basically have to say we have a control and then we have 5 test conditions. And that's very difficult to do. I think the thing here is that people are people. And so if you're a business person and you're making a decision and you have a pricing lineup for somebody else's company, you're still subject to relativity. That just doesn't go away because you're in a business. The thing to think about is the agency effect, where basically you're making a decision with other people's money. So if they're making a decision with other people's money, they may be likely to spend it more or not care as much. So you can imagine you design incentives for these business people that actually help them. Right, that it doesn't actually help the business, but it helps that actual person. Cool. $25.
Thank you, Kristen.
Oh, one more thing. Sorry, one more thing. Gosh, I almost forgot, right, to promote the books that we did. So irrationallabs.org is where we have the workbooks posted. And I think, obviously I'm biased, I think they're a very good comprehensive resource to thinking about how you apply the principles of behavioral economics to specifically product design. And then we have Startuponomics, where I met Soviet, coming up at the end of August, and applications close on July 7th. So we're only looking for finance companies, education, and health companies to attend. So startups or actual companies. Third thing, I'm gonna pass these out so you guys can meet each other. There'll be commitment cards. I accidentally brought my business cards. Usually we just have blank commitment cards. But what you'll do is basically take one, find someone, and then shake hands and commit on something. So it says, I commit to by frequency and then my signature. So this is basically saying, I commit to X, or, I commit to work out 3 times a week. Or do this for the next month, and if I don't, I will, Dan's when he did was run naked at Burning Man. So you can make it a very like explicit call out and penalty Ulysses contract. So I'll pass a few of these out. Sorry, Sophie.
Yeah, that's great. All right, and you have some water here.
Yeah.
So, thanks. That was really an awesome talk. And also thank you for all your suggestions. They ranged from more on product analytics and analytics in general for startup to design to hardware. So thanks a lot. You'll see some of these topics come up. While I'm talking about a few things, one of the things we do after the talk is something which we call shout outs, and I'm going to put this up. So shout outs are an opportunity. Oops, is the formatting completely messed up? Yeah. Okay. So it's like all crumbled here. What shout out are an opportunity for you guys to come and talk about something you're looking for, something you need, something you have to offer, here for 10 seconds and get input from the audience. So the typical format is, hey, I'm a designer. I'm looking for, some design work. Talk to me after, the talk. And so if you have things that you want to announce, please line up here. And while you guys do this, I want to talk about what's happening next month. So our talk next month is by an old friend of mine, Joe Robinson, who is ex product lead at Square and currently heading a product at a Bitcoin related company called Circle. And he's going to talk about our relationship with money in kind of the new world of Bitcoin or other alternative currencies. So it's a really exciting talk. If you want to sign up for it, it's live on our productsthatcount.com website, and you guys are on our newsletter, so you'll hear about our talk once a month. Okay, so July 30th. Anybody wants to do a shout out? You want to do a shout out?
I'll make my commitment, which is go running more at least 3 times a week. If I don't, I don't know. I'll make my girlfriend do it, I guess. Let's see. My name is G. I work for a small startup. We do independent film distribution. It's kind of like Netflix or Hulu, but we only specialize in independent films and documentaries. I'm looking for a product manager who will concentrate on growth and a user experience designer doing something similar. So if you're interested, come see me.
Cool.
Hello, my name is Santiago. I guess my commitment could be to eat more broccoli. And you see why that is funny, actually, and ironic. And if I don't do it, I cannot eat chocolate at night. I am the founder of the Orange Chef company. We are trying to change the way people eat. And that's why that's ironic. We make hardware and software. You guys might know PrepPad, came to the market very recently. And, we're really trying to do a lot of the example with eating and a lot of that stuff. So, if you're a developer, product manager, data scientist, you just have an idea or whatever it is, please come see me. We're very, very passionate about food and we'll have to talk to you guys about it. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks. All right. So thank you, everybody. Great to see you and hope to see you next month. There's more pizza and I think you have some handshakings to do. So enjoy.
Man.